Alright, we have 2 more age groups to go over. You can see the age groups are getting broader as we move on. The next age group is 8 to 12-year-old children. So 8 to 12-year-old children will be more independent from their parents and family. They'll have a stronger sense of right and wrong. And this actually is proven. It does click that from 8 to 12 years old, the children start to see, oh, this is right and this is wrong. And I think also from a writing perspective, that can be really interesting, because in your book, if there's a villain and a hero, these children can start to decide what is right and what is wrong, and they might take sides, and who knows if those sides are going to agree with the protagonist or whoever is around them, because these children are starting to make those decisions on their own. Granted, at this age, that is highly influenced by whoever is taking care of them, whoever is teaching them right and wrong. They'll start to pay more attention to their friendships and teamwork at this age. They'll have a growing desire to be liked and accepted by their friends, and this starts to become really important. If you remember, ages 8 to 12 is going to cover 3rd grade to 6th or 7th grade, depending on where you're born in the year. And so being accepted by friends at that point becomes crucial in the mind of a child. Language development for 8 to 12-year-olds is going to include reading and writing, and you might say, oh, but they can read and write before, and it's like I mentioned earlier, they can copy those words and they can copy those letters, but they're not really doing it in a fluid, comprehensive way. It's at this age where they start to put paragraphs on the page, and they start to write their own stories, and they start to actually read longer books. This is when they start to actually understand stories that have plot. They'll be able to relate to involved accounts of events and actually hold adult conversations at this point. As a teacher, I love going out on the playground and talking to the students during their recess. If they want to talk to me, if they want to play, I let them play. I actually prefer that they play, but it's really fun to talk to students and children at this age, because they want to talk about anything and everything. I've had fully intensive conversations about different kinds of dragons with 8-year-olds, and it was awesome and actually more fun than most conversations I have with adults, and not just because it was about dragons, but because of the perspectives the children bring at this age. Physical development for children's 8 to 12 years old are going to be really significant in the differences that happen there. This is when children's physical appearance really starts to change from one to another. Before this, they're typically the same height, they're typically the same physical development. The exception to that is malnourished or overweight children, and those are the exceptions to this rule. But at 8 to 12 years old, the children are going to start looking really different from each other. And that's going to affect not only their physical appearances, but also their developmental variations, their strengths, their hand-eye coordination, their stamina is going to progress rapidly. And those differences in appearance can be due to anything like heredity and nutrition, or just normal development. I should say, and just normal development. Intellectually, from 8 to 12 years old, they're also going to have rapid development with their mental skills, and they're going to have a greater ability to talk about their thoughts and feelings about things. And it's going to increase a lot more. I think I covered this a little bit with the reading and writing and holding conversations with their language development. That goes into their intellectual development. They start to think more logically. Logic games are going to make a lot of sense to them at this age, and this is when they develop more mathematical and literacy skills. Like I said, they start to read novels, they start to write in paragraphs, they start their multiplication and division. This is the age where they start learning their times tables, and in 2 years they're multiplying fractions and doing comprehensive equations. And so that happens so quickly at this age. If you have a book that's spanning a year, then your child character needs to develop quickly, unless maybe they're out of school or something, they're in a situation where that's not happening. I know in my book, Gregor goes from being completely illiterate to writing in his journal all the time, and it's really fun to write that. That also had to do more with the social situation of the kingdoms in my book. But if Gregor was a younger child, I wouldn't have had that happen, because he wouldn't be at a developmental stage where that's appropriate for that to happen. And if he was older, it might not have progressed as rapidly. Part of that is the way the brain is developing at that age. Emotional development at 8 to 12 years old is going to have children learning by watching and talking to their peers. They're going to give support to their peers in times of stress at this age. They're going to begin to see things from another child's point of view. And this is really hard, actually, for children to get a grasp on, even throughout this part of their life, is other people having a view. Because up to this point, yeah, they might see someone sad and comfort them, but they can sympathize, but they can't empathize yet. And this is when they start to empathize. This is when they start to say, maybe things aren't the way I see them. Maybe this person sees a different way than me. And that's a really crucial stage for children to go through at this point. Although children are able to empathize, they will still probably need help to express their feelings in an appropriate way. Okay, and the behavioral development of children 8 to 12 years old, they'll start to join clubs, they'll be led by their peers more than adults, and they'll want to be accepted by their peers more than other groups, which reiterates some of the earlier stuff, but it becomes more prominent with this age. The last age group of children that I want to talk about is actually teenagers that are 13 to 16 years old. And actually a lot of books have these age characters as the protagonists. If you look at young adult, a lot of them are teens. But this is probably why it's so important to understand this age. So the social development of 13 to 16-year-old children will have them spending more time with their peers than they will want to spend with their family or whatever group they were a part of before. They will start to form their own identity. They might explore clothes, music, hobbies, and they'll really push the limits, see how far they can go. They may select adults that aren't their parents to be their role models, whether it's celebrities or teachers or just someone in the community or whatever is available in your book. Teenagers will start to look at other people who didn't raise them for that role model place. Language development at teenage years, and yes, language is still developing at this age, but this is when they start to think abstractly. And before this, thinking abstractly is really hard for them. They'll start to use language to campaign for what they believe in. Before this, they don't use language to try and convince others. They don't use rhetoric. And so rhetoric as a part of language is what is developing in those teen years. This is why a lot of teenagers try to speak out or protest and that sort of stuff, is because their brain is learning how to do this, and frankly it's exciting to try new things that you can do. They may be at this age reluctant to speak to adults directly and prefer animosity, where they can try to make themselves unknown, therefore give the appearance of, oh, this could be an adult rather than a teen, which is how they want to be seen, even though developmentally they haven't reached adulthood yet. Physical development of children 13 to 16 years old will, of course, include puberty, and that's for both sexes. For some, the youngest that puberty usually can start is 11, and the oldest that it can start for late bloomers is 14 or 15. And also, that early bloomers, late bloomers stuff is going to affect all the rest of development. So it's important to keep that in mind. Rapid musculoskeletal growth is going to occur at this age. So the teens in your books should have growing pains. They might have, if you have a character who's really tall, then they might have really soft bones that are just being stretched daily as they grow. And so that could be an important thing to remember about your characters, is how they are growing and how that affects them in, honestly, a painful way, because growing is hard. Continued physical activity will be important to maintain strength and fitness at this point. This is when they start to look at their bodies and have a positive or negative body influence, and that is determined by how well they take care of themselves. When they're children, they don't need much to be healthy, but in the teen years, they need to actually exercise to maintain that fitness. So if you have a character who sat on the couch all day and now they fight demons, they should be out of breath. They need to go through the process of getting fit before they're going to be able to do that on the daily and get through the final battle or whatever is happening in your book. Okay, the intellectual development of teenagers is there's going to be less focus on oneself, which sounds weird because you think of teenagers as being very self-centered, but they're not self-centered if you compare them to, say, 2-year-olds or 5-year-olds or whatever. They're going to have that autonomy to understand that other people exist, as we talked about with the last age group, but they're going to be concerned for others. They're not only they're past the point of discovering that other people have different perspectives and feelings, and now they're concerned with helping people to feel comfortable with that and to have good, to be happy. Youth at this age will begin to question family and school rules or societal rules, mainly just because they are pushing their limits. And thus they will challenge parents. Another interesting thing that happens, and this does happen in the brain, is they believe nothing bad can happen to them and they become risk takers. And that is not just an overgeneralization. That actually, the brain chemistry checks out, and there is this belief that they cannot get hurt and they feel invincible. And it's like a false invincibility, and not every teen will have it, but a lot will. The majority will have false invincibility. I know that is not the official term for it. I can't think of what it is right now. But they will think that they can do more than they can, and that risk-taking is where you get teens that act out and do things they shouldn't be doing yet or don't know how to do yet, which I'll get to in the behavioral side of things. Before I do, the emotional development of a teenager will result in moodiness, and they'll display mixed feeling about breaking away from their parents because they'll start to think about living on their own, but they will also, because they are children, they don't want to leave their parents yet unless there is something going wrong at home, which in books happens because stories need conflict, and in life happens, unfortunately. Troubled youth may act out more and express emotional pain in ways that are not healthy. They might use drugs, skip school, get into fights. And behaviorally, teens are going to experience highs and lows caused by hormonal change. And those hormones mixed with the brain chemistry is really going to confuse them until they learn how to control it. Because again, their decision-making processes aren't finished developing yet, and they need help making decisions at this age, even though they don't want help. They don't know they need help because they don't understand how their own brain is working, which most people don't understand, and that's fine to not understand. So they'll try to avoid family activities, and they'll have increased demands for privacy and argumentativeness. And as I mentioned before, they're going to be risk takers. They may start to experiment with all sorts of stuff, like I said earlier, drugs, sex, all of that stuff that is just children shouldn't be in. And so as you're writing your characters, keep these developmental stages in mind, and no, not every teenager is going to get into bad stuff, and not every one develops the same way. So disclaimers on this video is people do develop differently, but they will follow this pattern. It's just a matter of when they reach each milestone. These are the generalizations. Things that are going to speed up or hinder that development may be in play. I have seen 3-year-olds who acted like infants at an orphanage that I used to volunteer at in a foreign country, because these children had never been taught, and therefore their brains had never developed to that point, and they sat in their cribs all day unless the volunteers came to play with them. And I have seen other 3-year-olds who went to advanced preschools who could have, or who did, count to 100 and understand the concept and could actually count high numbers of objects and stuff. And so everyone's different, and it's important to remember that, but this is the general developmental pattern. I'm sorry if this video is really long. Again, credit to helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com for those 8 rules I shared earlier, and credit to this other website that doesn't have a pronounceable name but will be in the description below for the development chart that I used to create this video. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, let me know by giving it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. Bye.